Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today I've got the tank review for the brand new Mercenary Tier 8 Premium Medium tank, the Reapers Scythe, which is naturally one of the Warhammer 40k tanks. This is the last review of all of the Warhammer 40k tanks. We've got there, we've made it, we've got all 5 out. And what are my initial impressions of the tank? Well, the tank it's pretty okay, but it's got some glaring weaknesses which make it struggle in certain situations, like Tier 10 games, because of the penetration. Naturally, if you get around the sides of things and the rear, you can have a good game. The camo's pretty damn good, and it slaps really hard for 440 alpha, so naturally, when you're trading, it goes pretty well. But there is a big thing in the penetration. The penetration, at best, is 212, which is just not good enough for a Tier 8 medium. And realistically, if it had 230 pen, you know, similar to a Draugen, etc., it would be a lot better in that regard, because it would at least be able to keep up and attack things that are Tier 10s. It wouldn't really struggle too much at penning some of the more heavily armoured ones. But as such, it doesn't have that, and it has 212 pen, which can be a struggle for it in the bottom tier matchups, but it does do really, really damn well in bottom tier games, because while it may not have the penetration, it certainly has pretty damn good armour. Not as good as a 430U, mind. Like I say, it looks like a 430U, but it's just like the Nemesis, where armour's been nerfed in a fair few places, which makes its armour not work as well as you'd expect by just looking at it thinking it's a 430U. It's not that god that you'd think it is in terms of its armour, but it does well enough. The turret armour's unchanged, but the hull armour is the thing that has been touched. So yeah, there is that. But yeah, on the whole, I've kind of liked it. I've had some pretty damn nice games in it. I do enjoy it because it's got a big boomstick. I mean, 440 alpha is nice on a Tier 8 medium. Is it better than T44? Probably, except for the fact that it can't really pen things at Tier 10. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's okay. But I mean, for 6,000 gold, because this is like 8,000 gold now, but once we get to the certain stage to get the discounts, you'll be able to pick this up for 6,000 gold, which is actually probably one of the better price tanks in the bundle. But again, it'll take quite a lot to get the most out of it, because you have to work around the terrible penetration, as well as the fact that the gun's fairly derpy too. But naturally, that comes with the territory of having a big boomstick at Tier 8. And realistically, if it's kind of like the 430U in the way that the gun handles, yeah, the 430U gun handling is not the best either. So let's have a look at the stats of the Reapers Scythe 430U. You've got 600 horsepower engine with a 48 km/h top speed and 18 km/h reverse speed with that 14.29 horsepower per ton ratio. You hit this 48 km/h pretty easily, which is nice. You do hit it, and you can get to those more aggressive positions to use your armour quite nicely and, you know, pretty effectively, which is decent. Again, it's not the fastest, but it's not the slowest, especially for the armour. 18 km/h reverse speed is also great. Absolutely fantastic. 10% fire chance is actually pretty low. I haven't been set on fire, if you can hear that touching wood. I haven't been set on fire yet in this tank. What I have been is ammo racked a lot. Yeah, that's one thing that you cannot see in these stats here. The ammo rack is very, very weak on this tank. That is one thing to note for you all. And out of, I think, the 26 times I've played it so far, I've been ammo racked for full health 7 times. 7 times in 26 games. Yeah, the ammo rack is weak, so bear that in mind. You might want to run safe stowage for that reason, to be perfectly honest. Yeah, the ammo rack's annoying in that regard. And it gets shot out a lot as well, which is even more frustrating. But anyway, besides the point, let's get back to the stats. 1,300 hit points, which is about right for a Tier 8 medium. You got 38 degrees a second on the hull rotation, which is okay. 1.8 on the soft terrain, 1.1 on the medium, and 1 on the firm. Fantastic soft stats in terms of those terrain resistances. You don't really have to worry about that too much. You got 317 meters of still concealment, which is fantastic. The camo on this tank is great. Just like the 430U, the camo is fantastic, and there's a lot of situations where you can abuse that, and you'll have a good time. And realistically, if you could put up with the fairly terrible gun handling at times, you could actually put a camo net on and make that even filthier. And you'll see some times in the replays that I'm going to show you where the camo is, like, you just get unspotted and you go, oh, I'm unspotted, and then you get to farm for a bit without actually getting seen, even though you're actually pretty decently close to people. You've got 370 meters view range, which is actually pretty low for a tier 8 medium. A lot of them are pushing 380 or 390 in that region. It's more like a heavy tank in that regard, having the 370 meters view range. So that's something to bear in mind, that you will want to make that better with situational awareness and optics and things like that. 370 isn't the best at all. And yeah, that's a fairly poor point of the tank. You've got 36 degrees a second, turret rotation, which again, to note, is slower than your track traverse, so bear that in mind. If you are, just like a lot of the tanks, I feel like I've said this a lot in these last 4 reviews, bear in mind, if you are shooting something, you're trying to drive past it, make sure that you're not driving, you're not turning the tracks the opposite way to where the enemy tank is, because your turret will not keep up with your tracks. 1.44 meters accuracy during rotation is not very good, and you'll want to make it better with vert stabs. 18 degrees of elevation and 5 degrees of gun depression. 5 degrees of gun depression is very, very Russian naturally, which means that you will not be able to use as many ridge lines as you can. You have to find the right undulation in the ridge lines and stuff like that to be able to get and use the 5 degrees of gun depression, which means it can be fairly awkward. If you don't like 5 degrees of gun depression tanks, you are not going to like this tank. If you can use 5 degrees of gun depression, you'll find it pretty, usable, just because it's on that line, right, where it can be irritating at times. You got a 14.5 second reload, which is pretty long, but you do have 440 alpha at this tier, which is pretty damn nice. And if you use the Hesh, you got 530 alpha, which is pretty filthy if it works. Because I've found that it tends to just derp a lot, realistically. So yeah, you got that. I think you get that down to about 10 seconds. You'll see when we fully pimp out the stats as well. You got a 0.4 accuracy with 4.22 accuracy during movement. 4.22. Oof. I didn't quite realise it was that bad. That's awful. You definitely want run and gun and vert stabs. Definitely. Okay, don't drop the vert stabs for a camo net ever. You want the vert stabs. By golly gosh, 4.22. That's rough. 2.3 second aim time, which is neither here nor there. It does feel a little bit slow, but at the same time, it's not that bad realistically for 440 alpha at tier 8. You'll take it, because I mean, a lot of tanks that have that higher alpha for like 440, think a defender have like 3 seconds, or even more than 3 seconds, like 3.4, stuff like that. 1822 base DPM, which is, again, it's fairly slow reload, but again, you do have that hefty round damage, so it's one of those things, right? You trade DPM for higher alpha, and that's what this tank does. You got 212 pen. Now, this is where the tank falls down heavily, because while you have some pretty damn nice stats for being top tier, your penetration lets you down for just being bottom tier, and it really does struggle to pen things. I have had some weird ass pens though in this tank, where I've shot at things like VK4502Bs at the lower plate and it's just penned. I'm sitting there going, that should never have penned. But besides that point, your 212 pen is awful. Well, okay, no, let's rephrase that. 212 pen is pretty good for a standard pen of a tier 8 medium. But the fact that there is no other round that's higher than 212 pen, that is pretty terrible. That's the way to phrase it. Because you do have this Hesh round for 530 alpha, which has 165 pen, which 165 pen is a little bit on the low side for Hesh, because a lot of the Hesh at the tier tends to have like, 180, 190, up to 210. And yeah, that means that there's quite a few tanks that you'll load it for, and you'll think you're going to pen them, and you don't. You just end up splashing them for like 150. So it's something to bear in mind. But yeah, the penetration is something that is a big letdown for this tank. You have 870 meters of shell speed as well, which is something to note that it's not the best shell speed, meters a second. So you really do have to make sure you lead your targets perfectly, otherwise you'll miss. Just give him a good set of lead. You do also have 630 on the standard HE, by the way, which is really nice for killing arty and the really, really lightly armoured tanks. and you get a standard 150% silver bonus, so 50% silver bonus. It does make pretty decent credits for a tier 8 premium, and naturally, because you don't really fire that much premium, when you do have the decent games, you will make a good amount of credits, because you're not going to be firing premium, even really in the bottom, especially in the bottom tier matchups. You basically never fire the Hessian bottom tier matchups, because it's useless in those games. So the 212 pen is all you've got. You tend to make a lot of money off of that. Anyway, let's have a look at the armour of this tank. So, like I say, you look at it and you go, oh, it's a 430U. Differences, just like the Nemesis. While it looks the same, it's a bit different. So, your turret face is 270, with 260 on the gun manlet, and then down to that, 180, somewhere around that region. Realistically, the important part is next to your gun here. So these bits of thick armour. So the thickest part of this is 270. Let's go have a look at the 430U, which we've got here. And you can see it's 300mm. 283 on there, 257 there, 220, 195. You get the picture. The turret armour is weaker, but while it's weaker, it's still pretty damn good, realistically. Because, I mean, for a tier 8 tank, 270 on the turret face is going to bounce a hell of a lot of stuff you face. Tier 8s, you're going to bounce pretty much all your tier 8s off the turret face. Tier 9s, tier 9s and 10s, you will bounce most of the standard rounds off your turret face. Turret armour on this tank is pretty damn nice. Even though it's been nerfed from the 430U, it's still nice. The upper plate is 130mm. This is where the big difference is, because it's 130mm on the upper plate, whereas on the 430U, you might have looked at the armour model colouring, and it's yellow, same as on the last tank, but it's actually 160mm on the 430U. So it's actually had a 30mm upper plate nerf. Or change, realistically. Down tier is the way of putting it. The lower plate, I believe, is the same, though, if we go find the lower plate. 105 on the lower plate, which is fairly weak. If we go over here to it, yeah, 105. So the lower plate's the same, but again, that's fairly weak, as it should be. So, in terms of the side armour, I believe the side armour's also been changed. So the side armour on this is 70mm thick, which is sound, to be perfectly fair, and 40mm. Now, this is something you've got to be careful of. Because, yeah, you do have 30mm of spaced armour there with 40 there, which makes it, 70mm of effective, and probably even more effective than that generally. But you do have to be careful, because you can see just under the lip there of this track, so just here, if you ever so slightly over angle, people can catch you here and overmatch you. And I've had it happen a couple of times now as well, and your ammo racks are behind this point as well, which is also why your ammo rack goes all the time. They can actually overmatch your side if they've got a 121mm caliber gun or higher, which a lot of the Russians do. So you do have to be careful of that. So as you can see, that's 40 and 70. Let's have a quick look at the 430U and see what that is. See if that is one of the big things that's been changed. And as you can see, 90mm on there. And that is 60mm, so it can't be overmatched. And the spaced armour bit on top is 30. So it's a lot more effective side armour on the 430U as well. So even when you're so it can be really good at side scraping, but you do have to be careful that people shooting you here and up into your flaps will overmatch you if you're not careful, and that will get you penned. As I said, there's a lot of times where you feel like you're angling about right because you're used to doing it in the 430U, and yeah, they pen you, and you go, oh, right, yeah, because it's weaker on the side armour. So the armour on this tank is a lot weaker than the 430U, but for being top tier, it's still pretty damn good. Anyway, let's get into the equipment, and that is, I run the advanced loader, the gun stabilizer, and advanced optics. So I run the rammer for 10% better reload, naturally, as always. The gun stabilizer is for the 20% vehicle movement accuracy and turret rotation. English is hard, by the way. So yeah, the vehicle movement, 20%, turret rotation, 20% on the gun stabilizer. And optics, I run it 10% more view range, because like I say, this tank is fairly blind. I want to make it better. And yeah, that's the way it is. In terms of the crew, I have hidden it in the teeth breaker. We will go and slap this into the Reapers Scythe. So here we run Born Leader, Rapid Reload, Sixth Sense, Situational Awareness, Camouflage Expertise, Muffled Shot, Steady Aim, Snapshot, and Run and Gun. So I run the gun perks, like I say, because the gun is pretty awful at times. It's 0.4 accuracy, you know, it's pretty derpy. I want to make sure that it is good as humanly possible, especially with Run and Gun with that awful on the move accuracy. I run Camouflage Expertise and Muffled Shot because, well, genuinely, I want to make the most of the camo. The camo is really dirty, and I can get a lot of stealthy shots off with this tank if I play my cards right. So that is a really nice thing to run. Instead of Muffled Shot, I actually have been very tempted to drop it out and put Save Stowage on for the 25% increase to ammo rack durability, because the amount of times I've been ammo rack now is getting ridiculous. The amount of times my ammo rack just gets damaged is crazy. The ammo rack is very, very fragile on this tank. I want to put that across to you. But yeah, that's what I run in terms of recruit and equipment. Let's have a quick look at the stats fully pimped out. So as you can see, we have got it up, the ground resistance is down. We've got the camo down to 303 meters of still concealment, with 473 meters view range now with situational awareness and optics. 39 degrees a second on the turret rotation, which is actually now faster than the hull rotation, which is great. 0.76 accuracy during rotation now, which is a little bit better than the 1.1 or something like that. A lot better than that. 10.5 second reload, which is slow, and it does feel slow, but the fact is you are hitting for 440, and if you do choose to load the Hesh rounds, you're hitting for 530, which is lovely. You've got a 0.32 accuracy, which is down from 0.4, which is nice. It still does feel derpy at times, especially at range, so you do have to be careful of that. And we've gone from 4.4 accuracy during movement down to 2.41, which is still not that great, but a hell of a lot better than the 4.4 it was. That makes me think, no, don't bother taking the vert stabs off and putting camo net on, because you will make your tank feel absolutely awful in terms of the gun handling. Yeah. 2.12 second aim time as well is pretty decent. And like you say, you've pumped your DPM up to 2.5k nearly there, which is, yeah, pretty okay. Like I say, you just feel that sometimes, especially with a lot of the quicker firing guns at tier 8, that does feel a little bit slow at times. So yeah, that's the stats and my equipment loadout, etc., for the Reapers Scythe. For the Reapers Scythe, like I say, I've had lots of games where I'm like, yeah, I really like this tank. It's fine because the armor's bouncing stuff and I'm penning things, I'm slapping them for 440. And then I've had a fair few games where I'm playing games and going, well, I can't do anything in this situation because I just can't pen it, right? Which can be very, very awkward. I mean, if you're in tier 9 and tier 8 games, there's a lot of tanks where you can try and just risk your armor bouncing things and get up close to someone and get to the side and rear to shoot them with the gun, but that doesn't always work. It's hit and miss. But for 6,000 gold, it's fairly cheap as well if we do actually ever get to that bonus for the 30% off. So that's always what I'd say to wait for, is that 30% off, so you can get the best deal, the best bang for your buck. And yeah, on the whole, I think it's okay. I just think that if the penetration was higher than 212, if it was like 236 like a Draugen, this tank would be well worth the gold. But that 212 is a very big sticking hesitation point. But that's just me. So as always, everybody, I'm going to send you over to the replays where you can watch them for yourself and you can see how it handles, how it plays. You can see if I'm talking a load of cobblers or if you think actually, no, that actually does look pretty decent. I might pick it up. So as always, everybody, I'll see you in the replays. So here we are in the replays with the Reapers Scythe, and I have 4 games for your faces. 2 at tier 10, and this one, which is at top tier, and then the other one, which I think is tier 9. And this first game is probably the more average game I've had in the tank in general, where it just sort of, the game's a little bit quick, but we do get stuck in. We do manage to use the tank to its strengths, but you also see where the armor is a bit more frail than the 430 as well, because, like I say, there's a lot of times when you're playing this tank where you take pens through the upper plate and you sit there going, yeah, this really isn't a 430U, is it? And yeah, because when you're playing the tank right and you're playing it, it does feel like a 430U in the way the tank is with its mobility, the way the track traverses, the way it looks, obviously the way it feels with the turret, the way the gun feels, because obviously when you're hitting things for 440, it just feels like you're a 430U. And then you take these odd pens through your hull that you go, ooh, okay, Yeah, I've got to remember that I'm not a 430U. So you can play aggressively, naturally, because your turret armor is fantastic still. And your whole armor is still good for a tier 8. It's still very, very good for a tier 8 medium tank. It just means that you tend to take a fair few pens that, again, you possibly wouldn't if you weren't in a 430U. So as you can see, we have pushed aggressively down this 1-2 line, and we've got against this LTG. I loaded the Hesh because I wanted to, well, pen the guy. Unfortunately, I missed the first shot on the move, which shows you just that the gun handling's poor on the move. But we only tracked this LTG, but we're going to make sure that this shell's going into this guy, and we shut him down for 447. We could have killed him with a standard round there, but, well, frankly, we also might have low-rolled and not killed him with that shell. Then we pull up, and we see this AMX M449. So we slap the Hesh round at his cupola, and thankfully that shell goes in for 529. Yes, please, yes, please, yes, please. We'll take those shells every day. We're up to 1,151 damage with 258 assistance, and their team's in a weird place. They've got a fair few heavies have pushed down to the C8 line, which is where heavy tanks really are pretty decent to go fight. And a lot of their mediums didn't bother with the JK line. They're all sat basically in their base or along this path here. I've got a heavy tank following me, so at least I know I've got a bit of backup with that. And we're just going to go get stuck into these medium tanks. We slap a Hesh shell straight through the lower plate of the Pantera for a big slab of his hit points. He ends up penning us twice in the lower plate. We make sure that we get another shell with the Hesh through his lower plate for 527. We do take a shell into our track, which tracks us in place, which is really annoying. Then the Pantera gets a second shell in. I'm kind of worried about the heavy tank behind me, the AMX M449 that we did pen, but we do also have a heavy tank behind us that is stopping that guy from coming around and shooting us in the ass. As you can see, we ended up taking a shot in the side there from the T-44, which I'm pretty convinced if we were a 430, we wouldn't have got penned at that angle. But, yeah, we ended up taking that hit. We do get to shut down the Pantera there, and the MX M449 finally does come round to shoot at us. But thankfully, he actually shoots the target too there. He should have shot me because he would have killed me, but it is what it is. We pull up on top of the little hill here, which I was pretty hull down to him, which is nice. We get a shot through the side, which damages his ammo rack. I'm just waiting for the reload to go in, and then we can finish it off. But unfortunately, we're just getting clipped by the Eradicator there, which meant that we ended up just missing the shell. But we were blocking the path, so I suppose. We're up to 3.2k damage with 2 kills, and there's 3 tanks left. There's a light tank, which is hiding somewhere, the 2 heavy tanks that are at B7. Now, realistically, I'm looking at this going, I'm not going to get anywhere near those heavy tanks. While I am fairly mobile, and as you can see, going over flat, we're going at about 45 kilometers an hour, I'm not that quick. I was well with my whole team in front and behind them. So the only hope we have is the light tank, if he is somewhere. And there we go, the light tank ends up getting spotted at G0. It's T41E1. And we're just going to hopefully try and get there to get a shot, because it is a Black Prince and a medium tank going in on this guy. I'm hoping that I will get the opportunity to get this shot in. Unfortunately, there's a building in the way, and it's like, yes, I can get the shot. Oh, snapshots. Again, this tank doesn't do snapshots all that well. Obviously, with RNG, you can get shots on the move here and there that hit, and pure RBRTs that work, because that's the way RNG works. But you should never rely on the fact that that's going to happen, because yeah, RNG still goes, ha, lol, no chance, mate. You're not hitting those shells. But anyway, we are still trying to chase after this Gorinich, but again, you can see I'm not really paying it too much attention, because I'm never going to get there, and the Gorinich ends up getting shut down, and we finish the game with a decent total for the Reapers Scythe. We finished with the epic victory, the 2 kills, 3.2k damage, 258 assistance, the second class, yeah, 1489 base XP. A decent game for the Reapers Scythe in a top tier matchup, where again it's just because the alpha is hefty. When you're bottom tier, top tier alike, the alpha is hefty. It means you do hit hard. It's not like you cut in tanks. You're not like hitting them for 150. You're not hitting them for 180. You're not hitting them for 240 even. You're hitting them for 440 alpha, and that is a significant blow whenever you're penning them. So naturally as well, with having a fairly long reload at 10.5 seconds, you're not really exposing that much either, which means that a lot of the time you're not having to take those hits on your armor, which can be pretty nice. And also, like I say, for the trading effect, right? If they hit you for 400, you hit them for 440, which can be pretty good. As I say, with the snapshots on the move, you can hit the odd one here and there. Sometimes they go in, sometimes they don't. That one didn't pen the Skoda, but it did hit him and track him, which means we got a nice 980 tracking assist. And we hit the Batchat 12T on the move too. Yeah, this it really doesn't hit shots on the move. No, it doesn't. No, okay, all right. You didn't see that. You did not see that, okay? And unfortunately, we missed the shell there on the Batchat. Really should have aimed a little bit more to the left, but also RNG could have guarded my shell there. It just didn't. It's sad times. So they haven't really seemingly sent too much over here. As you can see, we spot the Skoda T50 over there, and we slap the shell into the back end of that guy. We take a HE shell as well, and I'm thinking, is that the AVRE at the back? Oh, that's awkward. Okay, sure. Could also be an ISU. There we go. It's an ISU 152 that is actually stock. No, he's not stock because he just bounced an AP round off of us for 750 off our upper plate. We'll take it. Actually, there's a second ISU 152 back there. He could also be stock with the Derp gun. But we start slapping shells at this ISU 152 because we do spot them. Because this position is perfect for a tank like the 430U. It doesn't really have the gun depression to use a lot of spots. But here, the ridge line just sort of sets itself perfectly for you to be hulled down with your turret, and you can just keep poking out and shooting people. So we're going to poke round to try and get a shot in to finish this ISU 152, but unfortunately we don't give it enough lead and we miss. As you saw with the shot on the Skoda T50 a couple of seconds ago, really, not even minutes, the shell went really far to the left and really far behind him, but it still managed to just clip him and pen him. That's the shell velocity. The shell velocity is not the best. You do have to account for it and make sure you lead your targets. But as you can see, we're trying to shoot the ISU 152, but unfortunately we end up missing it yet again. We are being very careful of that E4, because naturally an E4 can absolutely trash your armor. We try and slam a shot at the lower plate of the E4, but unfortunately we bounce, because we actually hit the middle of the E4 there, which we have to hit the left or right of his lower plate, and that is our only chance of penning that E4 from the front. We have no real other chance than that. And even then we are realistically like a 50-50 to go through his lower plate, because we don't quite have the penetration. So we are just being careful. We did take a hit in the side there, which showed that we were exposing a little bit too much of our side armor to that Indian Panzer. And we've noticed the base is in a bit of trouble. So I decide, okay, you know what? Screw the E4 here. I can't really do too much to it. They are pushing our base. I want to get involved and try and help in the defense of it if I can. So we're going to push over here, and then the Vanguard gets spotted. And I'm thinking, okay, they're not actually capping, which means it's quite possible they're going to charge this way, which is kind of awkward. And as you can see, the T95E6 is going towards the Turan. So I'm going to take up this position here where I can cover my upper plate and lower plate and get hull down on this little rock. So we managed to be in a flanking position to get a shot into the E6. Unfortunately, the gun just derps a little bit with the shot and hits the E6 in the lower bit of his side, which only tracks him. Now there's an AVR recharging after the Turan. Surprise, surprise, because he can pen a Turan. And yeah, he starts looking at us and I'm like, oh god, actually he wants to shoot me, not the Turan. That's awkward. We get a shot into his side, but unfortunately he ends up derping us, putting us on 302 hit points. But look at the camo. We're unspotted right now because this bush works. And we're firing and we're not getting spotted. This is perfect. This is the perfect place to be. We get the tracking assist on that T95E6, which is nice. Now the Nemesis is driving out, which we aim as low as we can to make sure that we're avoiding the spaced armor, which we get a nice pen into the side of the Nemesis. But now that guy's in a bit of an awkward spot for us because he could actually end up spotting us. We're just looking for the shot into the Centurion AVRE. Unfortunately, it was angled just a little bit too well for my 212 pen to go through. And unfortunately, AVREs happen, and we can't really deal with an AVRE in that regard, because derps. But we do finish with the defeat, unfortunately, with the 3.9k damage and 2.2k assist with the Confederate medal for 938 base XP. In a bottom tier matchup, you did start to see a little bit of how the weakness in the pen there. We couldn't really deal with the E4 frontally. We started to struggle with, well, like the Nemesis, we couldn't really pen the Nemesis when it was facing us, but we could pen its side because it's got weakened side armor. If that was an E100, we well, unless we avoided the side skirts and hit the lower bit of the tracks, we also probably would not have penned it, which is kind of awkward. but we did have the side of the T95E6, which was helping me to get shots into them, and the AVRE did give me his side as well. If I had higher pen at the angle he was when we actually shot at him and bounced, likelihood is we probably would have penned and killed him, but yeah, unfortunately that didn't happen. And we couldn't really shoot the cupola on that AVRE either, because when he was sitting still, because again, we don't really have the pen to go through that, but it is what it is. We're on to the third replay, and this time we're in a tier 10 battle again, and this one we're going to do pretty well in a tier 10 game. So, naturally with tier 10s, if you do pretty well in a tier 10 game, you will get a lot of base XP bottom tier as a tier 8 heavy. And because this tank hits for 440 and starts to rack up that damage, your natural, say, the way to think of it is, right, is that your 10 shots of damage for the same amount of opportunity to shoot in a 430U or in the Reapers Scythe 430U, 10 shots of full damage would be 4.4k damage, right? Whereas if I was in the T44 100 or a T44, and I'm comparing the T44, right, because that is a Russian tier 8 heavy tank, medium tank even, not heavy tank, good lord. 10 shots of damage for the T34. T34? Come on, man. T44. We'll get there in the end. For the T44, would be 2,500 damage, say if we had the same opportunity to fire. Because a lot of the time, like I say, especially in a tier 10 game, you'll get the opportunity to fire once, and then you'll have this situation where the tank just stares at you. That bounced. And yeah, so the tank just stares at you, and then at that point, you risk it for a biscuit. But the armour does help you in that regard, because you can actually bounce the shots, so you can take that more of a risk when you hold down like that to get shots into tier 10s, which is nice. But yeah, so when you're actually shooting at these things, oh, you don't see FV215Bs on fire ever. No, you don't see those things get set on fire ever. We set that guy on fire, he ends up putting it out, but he gets shut down. But yeah, so when you're actually getting some shots at tier 10s, and you're racking up that damage, when you start to hit the 3 to 4k mark, where, you know, you're having a pretty good game. If you do that in a tier 8 game, you're probably looking at a second class. Whereas in your tier 10 game, you're looking at an ace quite easily, because you get so much XP for that bottom tier shooting of tier 10s. Which is why it's always the thing, right? It's a double-edged sword. If you're grinding a tier 8, tier 10 is awful. Tier 10 matches are awful, because you do struggle against bottom 2. Bottom 2 is a horrible thing. You know, it's one of those things that everyone always says. Well, not everyone, because some people do like +2, -2, but, you know, +1, -1 would be great, because you just feel like you can actually compete. But if you do well in those bottom tier matchups, boy, do you get a hell of a lot of XP. And that is always a lovely thing, and it really helps you for your true training as well in your tier 8 premiums. And as you can see in this game, we do probably fairly similar to the last game, but because we win, we get a very high base XP modifier. Anyway, besides the point, we're on vineyards, and the enemy team has basically stuck themselves in very weird position. Well, they've just basically not bothered with the northern half of the map, which is always a terrible idea on vineyards. Don't ever forsake part of the map. This Super Conqueror hasn't reacted to the fact that I am shooting him in the side. We were actually staying unspotted there until that medium poked forward, which is, again, was the beautifulness of this camo. We make sure we get that shot into the AVRE there for 2.8k damage now. And I want to move up again even further to keep these guys lit up so that I can get a little bit more assistance. We get a shot into the drive wheel there of the Super Conqueror, which feeds us some tracking damage. And we're up to 3.2k damage, which is so far pretty damn nice in a tier 8 game. Tier 10? Yeah, tier 8 in a tier 10 game. That's what we're going for. And I want to push up closer and try and get some shots into the rear of the tanks on the left. But then another Reaper Scythe and an AVRE appears, and I'm like, no. You know what? If the AVRE wants to shoot at my turret and give me a free shot into his side, I'll take it. But I am absolutely not taking a shot from an AVRE there, because he could probably one-shot me. So here we actually get to the position we want to be in, which is getting shots into the rears of those heavy tanks, which managed to finish off the OHO in the distance. If those two guys hadn't poked up on the left there, we'd have got there much quicker to get those shots, but it is what it is. And we're going to go poke up behind these two medium tanks. I'm thinking, are they still watching my way? I don't think they are. They've actually gone the other way. But the Reaper Scythe has actually come back for us. He shoots us in the tracks. We shoot him in the lower plate. He pens us and damages with our fuel tanks. We just pen him in general. And we're just being very careful here. And then it's like, oh no, that's not very good. Fortunately enough for me, the 268 version 5 actually fires on the move, which means that he bounces off our turret front, I believe, there. And now it's being very, very awkward. I can't pen this guy in the front like this. It's a 50-50, well, it's more than a 50-50 to go through his lower plate, but in the front, I don't really have any hopes. So I have to hug his side, but my best bet for staying alive here is to make myself as awkward as humanly possible. Now, if he'd actually not panicked there, he could have just shot me straight through the upper plate and penned me and killed me. But he panicked because I forced myself into his side and kept myself there so that he couldn't kill me, essentially. And we finished that game with the Ace Tanker, the Confederate, the 2.1k base XP with 5k damage, yeah, 2.2k assistance in a tier 10 game, which is a really, really nice score for a tier 10 game. And let's say if I was to do that in a tier 8 game, that would probably be like 1700 base XP and only a first class or something like that. That's just the way that these modifiers work. But you can see that even though you don't have the penetration, if you maneuver yourself into the right places, you can still do a hell of a lot of damage in this tank. Because 440 Alpha is powerful in of itself. Because you have that ability to trade. And like I say, because you have pretty damn nice armour as well, and it's not auto-pen armour, and angles and all that sort of stuff, you can also be very aggressive and very brawly with the tank, which is nice. Which is where I'd say with the crew skills, that if you were to drop muffled shot, I might take trap mechanic instead, because it is again very brawly. To be honest, even though it's a medium tank, if you are in a top tier game, you're basically a heavy tank, and you want to get stuck into those brawls, and you will lose your tracks quite often, as you've already seen, so you might want to get your tracks back on really, really quickly, although it's completely down to you. But yeah, you just got to try and use your armour effectively and try and work the position. Again, it'll take a fair bit to get the most out of it. By the way, yeah, this tank's terrible at shooting on the move. Yeah, terrible at shooting on the move. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, okay, sure. RNG. Nice. It's just the way it is with RNG, right? But yeah, so you can force the chances, but again, it takes a lot to get the most out of it, because you have to sort of know the positions and know the way to, well, to force the situation into your favour. Like I say, you do have the tools in the armour to force those sorts of situations, but it can get awkward because of the pen. Generally, I'll say the pen is pretty poor. So right here, we are on Serene Coast. We've got ourselves hull down. We get a shot into track the Skoda T56, and there is where we are not a 430U. That Skoda T56 has like 240-something pen on its premium rounds, which is what he's firing. And he went straight through the upper plate. Straight through it. Like I say, that is where you do feel the armour. Tanks that have that 240-50 pen do pen you through the upper plate on occasion. And fairly often, actually, to be honest. But again, if you're angling and you're wiggling, you can make it as difficult as possible for them. And because you've got the angles and pretty decent thickness already anyway, you will still be able to bounce the shots. Because you're not an auto pen. But it does happen, like you saw with that. As I said, the Skoda T56 doesn't have the best pen in the universe. Even on its premium rounds, it still went through the upper plate. Yeah. But because we've got backup now in the Tiger 1 and the M103, we've managed to force them back over their side of the ridge, which is great here on Serene Coast. This position at C1 is such a good position to come fighting at, because, yeah, you can get some good hull down fights going, and you can also maneuver into either base quite easily from it. So as you can see, we went for the ram there. This Pershing was not very happy I did that, but instead of shooting the T56 to death, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to give him a little love tap, finish him off, and then shoot the Pershing at the same time. And we managed to shut that guy down, and clearly the Pershing was very unhappy with me for shooting at him, and he managed to get shut down by the M103, which turned out pretty good for us in that engagement. So the the Standard Conqueror, because this is a tier 9 game, gets spotted. We try and get a shot into him on the move with the RBRT. It looked like it was going to fly true, and I thought, oh, here we go again. I said the accuracy on the move is terrible. But it ended up missing, like it probably should. And I'm going to put myself into a really awkward position on Serene Coast, because I wouldn't normally say... This is probably not the best play ever to do, and I would not recommend it in the slightest, but we make it work. And that is, we're going to go chasing after this 5100. Realistically, what we should do is go where our heavy tank and our medium tanks are going, round that corner to where the artillery is. Because this is a very, very exposed position. This is very dangerous, because if they all poke over that ridgeline in the distance, yeah, it's not going to go very well for me. But like I say, we're going to make it work. The Waffle Panzer IV is spotted over there in the middle. We end up damaging, well, breaking his engine with the shot, which is nice. And I'm just keeping my eye on that 5100 as he was driving out. We're going to poke round to see if we can shoot the Waffle Panzer IV again, but he ends up getting unspotted, which means we don't quite get the chance. The ISM pokes out in the distance. We're going to pop a shot at the ISM's lower plate, but we actually bounce off the lower plate there. We didn't pen, because we can't pen an ISM frontally with our 212 pen. It just won't work, especially at this distance. So yeah, it was just a chancy shot. That shot flies in, however, to the LTG, which is nice, tracks him in place. The Waffle Panzer IV pokes around the corner and gets a shot at someone. He's a big gun waffle as well. We have to be careful, because if he pens us, our ammo rack is going to blow. Also, he could also high roll and just kill us anyway, which is, you know, something. So, we've noticed the two heavy tanks. This is kind of an awkward situation. The two heavy tanks have killed our guys that were with us. But the Waffle Panzer IV behind us is an immediate threat. And thankfully, I break his engine again. And because he clearly doesn't have general mechanic, because most people don't tend to run general mechanic, he couldn't get his engine repaired in time, and I would have actually finished him off. But my teammate managed to finish him off. And now it's like, oh god, that's a Conqueror. Hello, Mr. Conqueror, who is stock, as you heard from the sound of his gun and the way it bounced. Which is going to make this fight a little bit easier, to be perfectly honest. But we managed to snap the shot into his tracks, and we damaged his ammo rack. As you can see, he's still ammo rack damaged too. He managed to bounce off our upper plate, though. If he had the proper gun, he probably would have penned us, if I'm totally honest. But yeah, we got lucky that he's stock. We try and get a shot into the Waffle Panzer IV in the distance, and yeah, we end up missing. I was thinking, oh god, that guy's got shots at my rear. That's awkward. But actually, the houses behind me cover me. Now there's this Progetto 66 behind. I've just got to try and get shots into him. We get a shot into track and pen him. And that, again, is where the armour, side armour on this tank is not a 430U, because he actually tracks us and pens us there. We weren't quite over-angling even that much. And, yeah, he managed to do it. The Conqueror comes barreling after us, and he ends up destroying the building. So instead of taking the hit, what I'm going to do is make it so I'm round the back of him, and we shut him down, because his reload was also still poor, because he was still ammo racked. And we get rid of the Tier 9 Conqueror there. Now there's only 3 tanks left on the enemy team. There's the Waffle Panzer IV in the distance, and there's the 2 heavy tanks, who are both one-shots, as we've just seen by the quick glance. So we load... This is kind of a mistake, because we load Hesh for this Waffle Panzer IV. I should load the standard HE, because no matter what, if I load the standard HE, I'm going to kill all 3. I'm going to kill 2 of them. I'm going to high roll. I'm going to roll for a big number on the other third. So I shouldn't have loaded the premium Hesh. I should have just loaded the standard. But it is what it is. We made that decision. We slapped the shell into that guy for about, what, 600 nearly. And he gets shut down, or 500. Anyway, there's only 2 tanks left now on this enemy team. This is the best game I've had in this tank so far, by the way. Just, yeah, pretty damn nice game we've had. And we just get there to slap the HE round at the ISM. Like I say, I was never going to pen an ISM frontally, so the HE was a thing that I needed to splash and kill it. And finished with the victory, the 4 kills, 5.7k damage, 2.5k assistance, 2.7k blocks, ace tanker, the steel wall, the high caliber, 2.4k base XP. A really great game for the Reapers Scythe, which is not going to happen every day, but that's the best game I've had in it. And again, it showed the trials and tribulations of it, where the armour isn't as good as a 432, which is good, because it's tier 8, it's down tiered. But you can see that, yeah, it's not as crazy as that. And the pen, you can see also, in situations, does let it down. So as always, everybody, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.
Great success!